I think we've seen many changes in terms of technology and the impact, and we've all had personal experience with AI. Perhaps I can start with Dr. Ali. Thank you for being here. Can you talk a little bit about productivity and the impact that AI is having on productivity in say, the more traditional sectors of the economy and industries?
Thank you very much. I'm inclined to combine all these things with industrial policies. So the recent changes in AI and what I would call IR4, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the new technologies it introduced to modern world is actually changing the way businesses are, companies are doing business. And they're changing business models by companies. So productivity is one part of it. But what I would like to focus is something related to industrial policy. So industrial policy in the past used to be about manufacturing. It's more about services these days. So when you said industrial policy, that meant industry, manufacturing, producing things, right? So now it's more services. So the world is moving towards a new paradigm where what we are consuming is more service rather than goods. And trade is also like that. So I think that the main big challenge is how to adapt to this, how developing countries especially are to adapt to this new changing environment. And I think it's the main challenge for governments.
I think you make a very good point here about services. I mean, if we think about the last 10, 15 years, something like cloud computing services that we didn't use before to any kind of degree, and now is possibly the biggest industry, and will be severely impacted by AI, both positively and negatively. And sometimes when the conversation is about AI, it's not always taking into account the shifting trends. Marguerita, if I come to you for your thoughts on how AI is impacting global employment trends and labor markets.
So what's new about AI is that it can automate non-routine cognitive tasks. This is something that couldn't be done before. And so that means that a lot of the occupations that are most exposed to AI rely on these non-routine cognitive tasks. They tend to be associated with high levels of education. This tends to be people in professional sectors, working in professional occupations, for example, managers, science and technology, engineers, for example. And so in this way, the impact of AI and its ability to automate, I think, will hit quite different to previous forms of automation. When we look across many OECD countries, what we find is actually in these highly exposed occupations, employment actually has been increasing over the last decade. And in fact, aggregate employment has increased more in occupations that are highly exposed to AI than in occupations that are less exposed to AI. So, I know here AI is quite a futuristic topic, and we're obviously, we're using data to look at what has happened to date. But, to date, I would say across most OECD countries, we're not seeing evidence of a mass displacement as a result of AI. That being said, I think, so in terms of an immediate priority for policymakers, for example, and for governments, I think it's more about how do we prepare for years of disruption to these occupations, rather than a total destruction of these jobs. So I think that's the
and when you mean priority. Disruption, do you mean disruption in tasks or in terms of the number of people employed?
I mean in terms of tasks and adapting to change. So essentially, what AI can do very well is individual tasks. And I think it's more limited in how it can, combine these or complete these tasks in a combined manner, at the way that a human worker would naturally be able to do. I think also a lot of the people in these occupations that would be highly impacted by AI, they're very good at finding, AI might take out or take on some of their tasks and might help them do their job better, but these people are quite good at finding other tasks to do and things that can bring more value to their organization and to their companies. So I think, when I talk about disruption, it's more about having the skills and abilities to be able to use AI as a tool to be able to find other ways to show your value in
It's
your
never
job.
going to be a quiet day at work again, is it? Is what you're trying to tell us. We're
Yes.
always going to have to be learning.
We have to be on our toes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I'll bring Dr. Micheal in to drill down to one of the sectors that you briefly touched upon, which is education, very human-centric. I think all of us in this room will have memories of a teacher that we're very fond of, or maybe not so fond of, but how will AI impact education at different levels?
Well, thank you for the question. I just want to echo, on the point that Marguerita mentioned. There's obviously a lot of interest around artificial intelligence, and it's about the replacement of certain tasks, whether it's in manufacturing, in other industries. I think Blady talked about how AI has been around for a long time and has been around for a long time. And I think the same thing is happening in education as well. What is clear is that something is going to change. The question is, how much is it going to change? And let me talk about the hype cycle of AI, which I think we need to be very conscious about as we're thinking about policies and plans going forward. I would say that there are 4 major hypes when we think about artificial intelligence in education. The first hype is that artificial intelligence is going to surpass human intelligence. You see that headline in many places. Tech leaders, prominent people like Elon Musk talk about how AI is going to surpass human intelligence this year or next year. The reality is, it's not going to do that anytime soon. AI can do certain tasks very, very well, better than humans. But talking about human intelligence, it's not going to do that anytime soon. It's the hype that's created by tech companies, by consulting companies, and it's driving a lot of fear. The second hype is that AI is going to replace teachers. And the argument goes like this. AI can work tirelessly. They don't negotiate for benefits. They are, you can access the tutor anytime, anywhere. They are not unionized. They don't need professional training. So why do we need teachers, right? With interactive technologies and so on, let's use technology and just get rid of teachers. Well, the problem with that hype is learning is a very human process. Teaching and learning is a very human process. We may have bad teachers, in the past, but good teachers know how to motivate learners, know how to adapt approaches to learning, and it's a very human process, like I said. So that hype, that we are going to replace teachers is another big hype. I think a third hype is that AI can solve any problem because of the widespread interest in adopting AI in different industries and so on. We think that it can solve any problem. No, I think AI can solve some very specific problems, but many other problems require complex solutions. And the fourth hype is that AI is going to be the great equalizer because you have content, you have infrastructure, you have devices, anybody can have all kinds of capability. Again, the reality, infrastructure, access, know-how, it's not just going to come like that. It needs a lot of additional efforts. So I think when we think about AI in education, we need to center on the very human aspects of what education means. And one big part of it is making sure that there's human in the loop, right? So my main points is lots of hype and noise about AI. We need to really discern what it can do and what it cannot do. We need to make the best use of AI to augment how human teachers, human learners can better do their jobs. And this human in the loop concept is very important, that we are augmenting, not replacing teachers.
I mean, well made your points on hype, but the hype is something we have to live with and navigate at the moment, whether justified or not. Dr. Ali, I'll bring you back in. You're an expert on economic transformations. I'd love to hear what your thoughts on, for developing economies that are already in the midst of a transformation, what does the arrival of AI, generative AI, and its rapid deployment mean?
I live in Japan. I'm originally from Turkey, Turkey. So I'm in a position to compare a developing country with a developed country. So the thing is, the developing countries, for the developing countries, one major problem these days is most of these AI and related technologies are produced and happening in, except if you consider China a developed economy, China can be one, but in developed advanced economies. But it's more self-centric, and there's no level playing field, actually, if you think about it. So if you look at the developed economies, AI can be a very efficient tool to increase productivity of low-skilled workers. I see that happening in Japan, in the healthcare industry, in the elderly care industry. Even taxi drivers are benefiting from, which is supposed to be a low-skilled job, from AI. But if you look at the developing countries, it's basically something for skilled labor, not unskilled labor. So there's this mismatch, I guess, between developed countries and developing countries. And when it comes to, again, my own research topic, industry policy, developing countries need industry policy more than advanced countries. But advanced countries, the industry policies are more, actually it's back in stage. They had forgotten about it for a long time. Now I'm back in stage. But developing countries have different objectives compared to advanced economies when it comes to AI in their industry policies. So having said that, I think that it is important that there's a lot for developing countries to learn from advanced countries, as long as they are ready to share.
In your opinion, do you believe that there will be greater resistance from, say, businesses in developing economies to the adoption of AI, given what you're saying?
Well, again, speaking about Japan, there is. It's all about, AI comes with so much, big firms are reluctant to immediately introduce AI into their own business models. It comes with huge adjustment costs. And companies usually want to stick with their original or already existing technologies. They don't want to change quickly. We see that in the past. It's happening again now. And if you look at Japanese companies, for example, you will be very surprised to see how little they use AI. So, and one thing you may also have noticed is that Japan doesn't produce unicorn companies, right? It's all about business culture, how it resists the existing changes. So I think that should be the point.
It's an interesting example of Japan, and you make the point that perhaps this is a matter for governments to set the agenda, to set the pace. And I'll bring you back into this, Marguerita, at least from the OECD's example. How can we ensure these policies, and to your earlier point, if this is going to be a long period of disruption, that the policies are inclusive and ethical, and ensure that it isn't just something that the skilled workers benefit from, but everybody gets a piece of the action?
Yeah, I think that's so important, because actually I talked earlier about the most exposed occupations up to now, but realistically, I do think AI will touch ultimately practically every occupation and every sector, just as computers are so widely available and seen across so many occupations and sectors. So it's so important that governments can help everyone to benefit from AI, all workers and also all companies as well. Let me just focus on kind of 3 areas that I think are important for governments to be working on. The first is skills. This is the really obvious one. The skills are necessary to empower and enable workers to be able to use AI and get the best out of AI. This is without this, you don't have the productivity gains that you're expecting. And I think this is important. It's important that everybody has these skills. I think there are a couple of different groups that might need specific targeted attention. And those are lower educated workers, older workers, and women as well. And the reason why I highlight these groups is that whatever research I see, these are the groups that tend to engage with AI less. So for example, there was one survey that came out of Denmark that showed that female workers were 20 percentage points less likely to have used ChatGPT than their male colleagues, people in the same jobs. But there was just maybe an attitude or a confidence or something that was holding them back. So these are groups that I think you want to target to make sure that indeed the use of AI and the benefits of AI are distributed in a very inclusive manner. The next thing is support for workers that are facing this disruption, support for workers that are experiencing displacement as well, because this will happen to certain occupations. One example of an occupation which I think is quite exposed to AI and yet could see displacement, and it is the kind of clerical work that AI can do quite well. And so these people need support in terms of the government providing re-employment opportunities, retraining opportunities, and also ensuring that social protection is there for them in their time of need. There's no need to reinvent existing systems if they're working well, but it may just need a certain amount of anticipation of which occupations are going to be impacted, which sectors are going to be impacted, which regions are going to be impacted, and which groups are going to be impacted in order to make sure that those supports are in place.
Sorry, go on.
And just a final point, because it was brought up in the last session, the importance of social dialogue in agreeing wages that work for companies and work for workers as well. And so just to point out that actually social dialogue can also play a role in making sure that AI works for companies and it works for workers as well. Who understands a person's job better than the person doing that job? And so actually I think workers can be very good at identifying uses of AI that can really uplift their productivity and improve the way they work. I think it's also important to get buy-in from workers as well to ensure that it's
it may be the case that people don't realize they actually have some influence and power over how AI is used. They're maybe waiting for the government or leaders to tell them, but actually you can decide right now in this period how much of AI you can use or not use.
What's so interesting about the launch of ChatGPT, AI existed before that, but what's interesting about the launch of ChatGPT was that anybody, workers, anyone at home, can access AI, leading AI just by themselves. And so actually in many companies, it is actually workers that are the ones bringing AI into the workplace. That's quite exciting. And so I think companies should encourage that engagement. And OECD research has found that that the adoption of AI tends to be more successful for companies and for workers when workers are consulted as part of the process.
Dr. Micheal, I'll bring you in for the last sort of point here. You mentioned skills, and maybe I flip the kind of paradigm here on AI. There's been a lot of discussion about how education systems do not ready people for the workplace. Can AI help with that, you think, going forward?
Well, I think there are two aspects. And one aspect ties in with a point that Marguerita mentioned. And it's not just about AI, but when we think about our labor force, where are the skills gaps? And that's one thing that we don't understand very well as policymakers, whether we are in education or labor markets and so on. So one of the first things that we really need to do is to look at what is the impact of AI on jobs and the skills that are needed. And this is some work that that I had done previously in Singapore, building skills frameworks and skills taxonomies. Now I'm doing that using a project called Skills Engine for Mexico and for Latin America. Did a lot of work with Burning Glass, Blaze, former company. But we need to understand where are those gaps. And then we need to help our workforce address those gaps. There are a number of gaps that are AI related, so we need to understand that well and build the interventions that will help the entire workforce to build those skills. Again, in the Singapore example, there was a program that we developed called Skills Future for Digital Workplaces, targeted at the entire workforce to uplift the understanding of digital capabilities, AI, and so on. We have a project now in Madagascar, in the developing country context, to build digital skills. So it's not just advanced economies. Developing economies and underdeveloped economies need to really respond, and we need to respond with clarity, what areas, what jobs, and so on. And finally, we're also bringing AI capabilities to marginalized communities. There's a project funded by a corporate foundation addressing the needs of youth that have dropped out from school. How do we use AI to help them, to educate them, and to be able to close that digital divide? So there's clearly a need to bring about widespread AI awareness and capability across our population, not to jump into the hype, but there's that real need that helps them to be productive and employable. And we need to mobilize resources from governments, from multilateral development banks, from corporate foundations, because it's a big monumental task.
Thank you so much. We'll have to leave the conversation there, but certainly you've left the impression that we should all be prepared for a journey that is going to dominate our work lives going forward. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. But please join me in thanking our esteemed panel for their insights and their time. Thank you so much.